Welcome to the Vibrant You Health Show. This is your host, Blake Bars. At Nature's Pantry, our mission is to lead you to vibrant health through the best nutrition, supplementation, and expertise. In the Vibrant You Health Show, we aren't interested in fads or quick fixes, but rather we want to get into the holistic fundamentals to health. We want to answer the questions like, what are the underlying causes of health issues? What are the keys to optimal health? The information provided in this show is intended for your general knowledge only and is not intended to be, nor is it, medical advice or a substitute for medical advice. If you have or suspect you have a specific medical condition or disease, please consult your healthcare provider. If your provider has a strong understanding of nutrition and holistic health, even better. The opinions expressed on this show are those of the host and their guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Nature's Pantry. All right, welcome everybody to the Vibrant You Health Show, episode number 25. I am so glad you're joining us tonight, and I am so humbled and honored to have my special guest tonight, Dr. D.C. Winkelman. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining me tonight.
Oh, it's great to be here.
I've really enjoyed getting to talk to you over the last, I've talked to you before in the store a couple times, but having you over to my house to visit and then getting to talk with you today has been really neat. So I'm excited about this episode. So, Doctor, tell me, I want to know a little bit about your background. You told me you have 2 doctorate degrees, yet you don't use either of them. Could you explain that a little bit?
It's very interesting. You go to school, you spend all that time. The first time for me to get my first one was 7 years at Pacific University in Forest Grove, Oregon. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. And so I came out feeling like I really knew what I was doing. And guess what? I discovered that I wasn't really knowing what I was doing, just like all the other people that are trying to help people learn to think.
Okay, well, so now, Dr. Winkelman, how did you get into cognitive brain training? Tell me first, what were the doctorate degrees you got?
I was an optometrist that specialized in information processing and learning disabilities.
Okay. And what was the other degree? Oh, optometrist and
in educational psychology. Mm-hmm. And I got that way back. It was 64 when I got my first one, and I was up in the 80s when I got the PhD degree, which again, I don't use either one.
So you were an optometrist, you are an optometrist, or that's when you got your first doctorate in, and then you got an educational psychology degree. So how in the world did you get into cognitive brain training?
Well, it started out as visual training in the college. And I just loved it, helping people with their visual training and all of that. And then it evolved in developmental learning as part of the college things that we worked with.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about cognitive brain training and what it entails. Can you touch on the concept of neuroplasticity? And I'm curious about how cognitive brain training can be good for your health, because we're all about health on the Vibrant You Health Show.
Oh, I can tell. Well, anytime a human being has continuous stress, it affects their whole life. It affects their body metabolism. It affects their ability to deal with their marriages, and it affects their work. Your body tends to stress up and shut down in certain areas. So basically, when I got started, I started what's called the Learn to Learn Institute. Now, that sounds interesting. Learning how to learn. You know, we learn how to drive a car and spend 3 months doing it, but we don't take any lessons in how to learn. We go to school, and the school has teachers that are working really hard, and they love the kids, and they've been trained certain techniques to use in certain conditions, but they haven't been trained much past that. And that's a real interesting problem that I ran into for years and years. I've been doing this work now since 1964, which is over 50 years. So,
my goodness.
Yeah. Anyway, and there's so many different things that happen. I'll give a question to the folks that are listening. All of you, or a good percentage of you, will have children of your own. And in my case, I had 2 boys and a girl, adopted 3 girls, and then had 3 more. So I've had a lot of experience, and I just loved every moment of it. Anyway, so one of the things that happened, and I'd like to share an experience that really made a turn in my life. I was raised in a time period back in the 50s where the doctors did doctoring, the car mechanic did that, the plumber did plumbing, the teachers did teaching, and the rest of us, we just kind of loved and took care of our kids. Well, I realized that that was not the way it was supposed to be. We as parents are in charge of our children and teaching them how to learn and all that, but we had no experience. And so what I was starting out with, it was just like everybody else that has kids. I had no real experience, but boy, do I love working with the kids now. So
That's cool.
I had an experience with my son. My son has a very, very high IQ, my oldest son. That's the 2 older ones are boys. And he runs a construction business in the Vancouver, Washington area, and he builds the nice $1 million homes along the Columbia River.
Mm-hmm.
And so there wasn't anything that he could not do from the baby on up.
Mm-hmm.
But when he got to school, he happened to have a teacher that was having problems with thinking and age. And it was a kindergarten teacher, and she had the most wonderful classroom. It had a kitchen in it. It had a living room in it, but the kids didn't dare use it. That was her living room and her kitchen. And the little boys, when you have little boys, many times they don't get themselves put back together real good when they go to the restroom. So she'd make them stand there with their hand over their private area and make fun of them all day long.
Oh my goodness.
It was a real sad thing. And he was coming home and starting to have nightmares and everything. So he gets into the 1st grade, and I'm not disturbing the teachers. I'm respecting them and hoping everything goes good. They get towards January, February of that first year, of the year of the 1st grade. And they said, well, we really think your kid should go through another year because he's had such problems this year. He didn't even learn hardly any of the basic stuff. Right. And so I said, okay, if you want to do that. I let him go to the school again. And I said, well, it's getting on to January, and how is he doing? They said, well, we really think we need another year. This kid's got an IQ of about 150. That's really high. Normal is in the 90s. Anyway, so I said, no, we're not going to do that. So I saved a whole week for that boy in my office. I canceled all my other appointments, and I started working with him. And it was one of the most frustrating experiences in my life, because every single thing I asked that kid to do, he could do. It was something else.
Wow. So
anyway, I took him to my office, and I was at the end of the office. It was like on Friday, and I had a phone call, and I gave him a book with some basic things in it. And I said, go in the back room and see what you can do. Well, he had hardly got out of my sight back there, and I heard this screaming coming out of that back room. And I went running back to see what was. I thought he put his finger in a light socket or something. So anyway, I get back there, and he's screaming that he couldn't do it. I can't do it. And I discovered right then and there that I knew what he had to do. And I realized that I did not know what I was doing. I was doing like the school teachers. I had learned certain techniques. And so anyway, I would apply the techniques, and I was having tremendous success, but I really didn't understand what I was doing. And so that's when the very beginning of finding out how people really work and developing a training program that parents would be taught how to help their kids to succeed.
That's cool. So what did he need? What did you realize that he needed?
He needed basically everything. He had to learn how to use his brain properly and do it academically. Excuse me. So anyway, and so then I started out with, well, okay, how does the brain develop? We know how a baby develops. It's all programmed, isn't it? We don't have to take and put a finger on it. It comes out and everything is working properly, step by step by step. And I got to wondering, did our Creator, did He set that up perfectly in the learning system as well as in the physical system? And guess what? He did, but we never had figured it out. So what I did is I started doing research, and I found out that the first thing is we don't have a brain. Oh, I was teasing you about that the other day.
Yeah.
We really have two brains, the right brain and the left brain. And the left brain does the analytical and logical and all of that. The right brain does the emotions and all of that, and they blend them together. But they start out with the development of just a step, and they start learning shape and size, position in space, details and background, and the most important of all is direction. Every single thing we're doing is direction. Now, Blake, just now as I'm watching you, you're leaning your head forward and back, your eyes are going up and down, and so direction is right there.
Right.
So we start to develop those things, and I had to create in my training program called the OTIC program, and it involves all of the senses, but you have to take it step by step with each individual. And so when people come into training, I train the parents. Oh, another thing is, I don't think anybody should train a child without training the parents. I would never allow my children to go to the doctor unless I was in the room. So anyway.
That's a good point, and I think that's interesting that you mentioned, how much the parents need to be involved in that. I think that's something that we haven't really been accustomed to. We're, a lot of times both parents are working full time, and we figure we pay good money to have the kids taught at school, and you're so busy, it's hard to have time to do things like that. But I think it's interesting to bring that up because perhaps our priorities need to shift a little to the children and helping them. And so tell me now, in your experience, you've seen people's brains. It's an interesting concept to say you teach people how to use their brains, because you would think that, I think, well, I know how to use my brain by now, Dr. Winkelman. But I've come across this concept, and we talked about this earlier, of neuroplasticity, which is the idea that your brain can change, and the neural pathways in your brain we can rewire. And the old saying that an old dog can learn new tricks is quite true. I would imagine it's probably can be easier even with children before they get too many of those old tricks and those old pathways really well worn and really well beaten down in the brain, so that it's easy to go back to. And I've heard it said, Dr. Winkelman, and maybe you can affirm this, that neural pathways in the brain form quite the same way that rivers form. And you have a little bit of water that follows a path, and the more water, the more the path is ingrained, and the deeper the channel, and the easier it is for water or that behavior to run through that channel again and again and again. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, it's interesting. If the people out there are believers in God, it says in the Bible that we can take and move a mountain with our brain. Now that doesn't make sense, does it? We can't hardly get the milk off the table into the refrigerator. But I believe it. I truly believe it. But we have not, as humans, this is my opinion now, after a lot of study on things, we have not been allowed to use our wonderful brain at its full level because we haven't proven ourselves to be totally responsible. And that's what part of what we're here. We're here to learn to love people, but we got to be responsible too. So anyway.
Yeah. So that's really, I really like that concept. That's it's inspiring, but it's also intriguing and mysterious, and I'm interested in that. So I think that's a whole nother episode perhaps. But I want you to touch on Now you touched on why cognitive brain training can be good for your health, and I found that interesting because we talked about how stress is so important, right? And the little bit of time we spent together, can you hear me okay, doctor?
Are you talking about our preferences for
Yeah.
processing
Well, so
information?
what I found was so interesting was the idea that if I train my brain to um, function in all these different angles, like for instance, you were showing me how to walk forward saying the alphabet and then walk backwards saying the alphabet, walk backwards saying the alphabet backwards, and then you were talking about going diagonal and around, and it kind of opened my mind to the idea that if you learn all these different directions of thinking about things and all the angles to come in, like the normal way of processing just becomes so easy, and then it reduces stress. And I'm so interested to learn more about this because I feel like if I can become better at processing tasks and thoughts and not get all stressed out about all the things, because frankly, life is kind of stressful and we got a lot of moving parts coming at us and a lot of priorities and a lot of responsibilities. So if I can train my brain to handle that better and get less stressed out, I am all excited about that.
Well, we also talked about your preferences for taking information in through
Yes.
your eyesight, your
Yes.
hearing, and your touch muscle
Mhm.
process.
Yes.
And so
I can share a little visual for the audience on that.
yeah, okay.
Let's share that right now.
Okay, that'll be nice. We'll talk about it. And they can actually do this at home. Okay.
Yes. So here you have it. Can you
Would
see
you
that
like
okay?
to go ahead and explain your chart here?
Yeah. Well, so EHTM, and these are our processing preference profile. And for instance, some people might first prefer to use their eyes to process something, or look, or watch, or be shown. Some people might prefer to hear, or talk, or listen to process things first. And some people might prefer TM, or touch muscle, or move, or do, which is how I personally am. That's my first process. And my wife always gets mad because I start walking around when we're talking about things.
Oh, it's so much fun. Now, let's assume that people might just be an individual out there living by themselves, or their spouse is gone, or they go to a church meeting, or they go to a council meeting, or they go to school and talk to the teachers. Everybody is going to pick one of the three processes. So now if at home there you have a piece of paper and a pencil, I'm going to list those for you, and I'd like you to write them down. There's going to be 6 little sections that you're going to write. So you'll do 2, and then down below 2 more, and at the bottom 2 more. So to start with, hopefully you have found a pencil. Okay, we're going to start with eyesight. We ask you, which would you prefer? Would you rather look at something, talk and listen, or do something? So you put whichever one you want. There's no right or wrong to it. So if you like to look at it, put an E. If you'd like to talk about it or listen, put an H. If you want to do it, tactile, kinesthetic, or touch muscle is at the top of your thing. Now we're going to ask you, if you have an E at the top, would you like to use H for talk and listen, or TM for doing, and put that under the E? So now that the TM would come as the bottom. So on your first one might show up like that, or it may show up with an H at the top and a TM at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the one that we did at my house with Misty and me and you when you were over at our house. And we found out that Misty, my wife, she preferred to see things first. She wanted to look at something first, was her preference on processing. Then she wants to hear it. And last, she wants to do something or have her motion or kinesthetic sense involved. For me, we're almost opposite in that I first want to do something. I want to get the muscles and the movement involved in the process. And then I want to look at it, and then I want to hear. So, so anyway, could you tell me what would be a good approach for me to go talk to Misty if I wanted to talk to her about a golf tournament I wanted to play in?
Okay. So first of all, Misty is not in the touch muscle level up front. She'll get to it. So in Blake now, he is going to be sitting across the room or whatever. And so he's going to have to learn if he's going to explain, what was that you were going to do?
I'm going to want to play in a golf tournament.
In a golf tournament.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. So now for him to explain that to Misty, he needs to get a picture of a golf tournament. And he takes
I need
the
to
golf
get the flyer. I need to get the flyer and show it to her and let her process
it. Exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you're going to want to be talking, but you go over and you say very shortly, Misty, this is something I'd like to do. Have you got a minute where you could look at this?
Mm-hmm.
See, ask her. If she says no, then you come back later. So you hand it to her and you don't yabbity, 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 right? Now, when she looks up is the first time you're going to talk, because she's going to shift to where she's going to listen to you because she's already looked at it.
Yeah.
And then as far as the touch muscle in this case, it would probably be a shake of the head. Yes, it's okay. I'm saying that on your favor, you see.
Right. Yes. I like that.
So what if Misty wants to get a new dress?
Yes. Well, she's not really that interested in those things. Let's see. What would Misty want to do? Misty would want me to watch the kids while she had to do something.
Okay. So now when you have a touch muscle person that's first, you have to go ahead.
So what I think, yes. So if she wanted me to do something for her, like watch the kids, then how would she approach me?
Well, she has to neutralize your touch muscle. Otherwise, you're dealing with H, which is the last one on your list. Mm-hmm. So what she does is, I call it long distance. Mm-hmm. From the sink to the couch is long distance. Okay? So, and then we have kind of a magical finger, I call that, just for fun. So Misty then walks over to you, takes and touches her finger on your shoulder. As soon as it gets on there, you won't hardly be able to walk away. Otherwise, as soon as she starts talking, you may just drop and walk out on her and get her angry. So when she touches you, the next thing she does is what? She shows you the kids. Here, look at these kids. They're going to be blah, 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 wash. And the talking, it blends in with that in that particular case.
Hey, and another way I think would work for me particularly is to be like, oh, we should go on a walk this evening. And while we're walking, she could be like, oh, look at how cute our kids are. And then how lovely they are. And then say, I would love it if you would watch them on this day while I go spend some time with my mother or something.
It's perfect. You got it right to the wall.
I love that.
One of the big problems with this is it affects families totally. Mm-hmm. Now, in my experience, if you have, like, I've got 9 children and my wife, almost everybody has, if they have more than one child, guess what happens? Mm-hmm. You got a half a dozen kids, one of them becomes the one that nobody else likes because they're all the same process and that one kid's different. Right. It has nothing to do with the kid. It has to do with his preference for processing information.
Oh, interesting.
Now,
that's so cool.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just think that's really neat and really insightful. And I think you could gain a lot from learning this about people that in your family, people in who you work with, people who are in your church, people who are in your friends group. And that's how you know, oh, they like this person. And I honestly think you could probably, even if you just knew people's first preference, that would go a long ways. If you just know what their very first preference is.
Yep. Well, then, like schools, our nation has it. You're supposed to look at it, talk about it, and do it.
Right.
So if you're one of the opposite of that, where your touch muscle, hearing, and eyesight, the teacher's showing you on there, and the kid, he wants to play, so he's poking, pushing, messing, thinking around in the classroom. The teacher's going crazy.
Yeah.
So the
right.
teachers, they would blend so wonderfully if they knew this about each child, like you put the touch muscle in one group, the hearing in another, and the eyesight in another. So if she's up there and she's not showing enough, the eyesight group's messing. If she's not talking enough, the hearing group is messing. And the touch muscle group always are the best for messing. And so it's not that they're doing something wrong.
Right. So you could have 3 rows and put the kids based on how they process. And if one of the rows was getting out of line, you knew, oh, I'm not showing them enough. Or the other group's getting out of line. You're like, oh, I'm not explaining this verbally enough. And the kids that are not paying attention in the touch muscle, you'd be like, oh, we're not doing enough. We're not doing an activity.
Yep. And now, if you could teach your kids, like your little ones are so precious. I was so delighted. This, Blake, you've got a wonderful family.
Yes, thank you.
But anyway, if your kids knew, this is daddy, this is what you have to do to communicate with daddy.
Yeah.
See? And then if you knew, by the way, I have kids 3 and 4 years old that tell me what they like. Oh, I like this and this and this. It's amazing the intelligence of children today.
Yeah.
I was telling you one little thing about my 3-year-old grandson. I've got like 25 and great grandkids all coming out my ears, But this little one of my little grandsons, his name's Milo, by the way. And I said, Milo, blah, 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 blah. And he stopped and he put his hands across and he looked at me, says, Grandpa, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So
he's very sharp.
And adults, we're locked into these things, and we find out that we're not communicating well with other people on our job and all of that. So anyway, and it's so simple.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we sell kids short. I think they're much smarter, much faster than we think they are. My wife taught me that even with disciplining our children and teaching them know about certain things, how quickly they know what they're doing. And a lot of times we say, oh, they just don't understand yet. So we're not going to, I think they know more than we think they do sometimes.
Yeah, they sure do.
So, you had asked me how many senses do we have? And I went through them and I was like, well, we can see, we can touch, we can smell, we can taste, and we can hear. And that's 5. And you said 5 senses. And you said, nope, there's 6 senses. And I said, what are you talking about? And what is the 6th sense? The kinesthetic sense?
Yes, the tactile kinesthetic. Yeah. So eyesight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell, and the muscle sense.
Yeah. And you know what's so interesting? I am such a touch muscle person, and that's like my biggest thing. So, and I was never taught that. So I'm like missing, not even realizing that is a big part of how I function. And actually, I went through a pretty big stage clear through middle school where I was very obnoxious and would have outbursts in class.
Wow.
Like just say funny things, think I was being funny, disrupt the class just because, I wanted to be doing things.
You get attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really true. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, one of the things that frustrated me was this is related to our education system. I love teachers. I've been teaching teachers for the last 50 years. And I've never really run into a teacher that really didn't care. There are some out there that are not caring, but they're so frustrated. So here's an example of what we are doing. If you have your car and the motor's not working properly, by the way, this isn't criticism of the school. This is what's happening. If it's not working properly, would you take it to a mechanic that doesn't know how to fix motors. In the last 50 years, I've never run into one person that said, yeah. I said, does that make sense? But what we do is we take our children to loving, caring people who are teachers who don't understand how to teach. They're using techniques that they learned in school, and it's a general thing. If you have this system, this is the technique you use, instead of knowing exactly how to zero in and hit the mark, which is what the child needs, or the adult, by the way.
Right. It's kind of hard to give one standardized method of teaching for so many different types of people who learn so differently.
Yeah. And our most precious thing that our Creator has given us are children. And boy, I love my children.
Amen to that. Absolutely.
So anyway, and it's not that hard to teach.
So
I can give you an example.
Yes, please do.
Of how it works today.
Yes, because you've been hired by many different schools and school districts, haven't you?
Oh yeah, it's something.
At one point, at one point you had what was it, like 12 different offices?
I had 12 offices. Yeah. In 4 states.
Yes. So what was one of the most memorable experiences you had in helping schools and children with cognitive brain training?
Well, it has been a frustration. Okay. In Vancouver, they had a school where people went. It was a single school in Vancouver, Washington, but they had 9 school districts that sent kids even from out of state there. It was a vocational school, Evergreen district. And so I lived in that district at the airport in Vancouver, so I could park my airplanes out front. And, I enjoy like flying too.
Didn't you say you lived there and you had an airstrip right out your door or something and you could just take off right there?
Oh, God, yes. I could just walk out of my house across the street, get in my airplane and fly up to one of the mountains in our area.
Yeah. Anyway,
but that isn't what we're supposed to be talking about.
So you were in the school in Vancouver. Is that right?
Okay. And they heard about from students that I worked with that the school couldn't help. They heard about success over a 10-year period. So I get a call from the vocational school, and they said, "Doctor, do you suppose you could help us down here?" And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, come by." And I went down and talked to him, and lo and behold, they were doing everything they could to help the kids, but hardly any of them were ever getting their diploma for high school. So I said, okay, let's do it. Let's take it on. So we got 25 students that the teachers picked out had no chance of graduating. I evaluated them with my evaluations, and I used a standard evaluation the school used, and they tested them, and we took the 12 worst ones, the ones that they knew couldn't make it. Anyway, so they decided that they would take us on, and they would provide a place for each student to do their studying and training. And it was kind of interesting because they had a warehouse behind the school, and it had an 18-foot ceiling and cement walls, and had a little thing that was about 4 feet wide with a bench on it where they stored stuff. And the one light bulb that came down was a 50-watt light bulb. And that's where we were going to train the student. There was no heat or anything. It was out there in a garage. And so then another student, they took a piece of a high school with a hallway, and they had the student at a desk in the hallway. And those were the places that we had to actually work to train the students. Well, we had magnificent results. I mean, word was getting all over the school district about what we did. By the way, every single student that we worked with all graduated.
Wow.
It was incredible. So anyway, we finished up. I had 90 teachers from the district that came, and I did a 2.5, 3-hour seminar on thinking and all of that. They were all excited. So I'm waiting for a letter from the superintendent. And sure enough, about a week later, I get this letter, and it was beautifully well written, except it said some things that was interesting. It says, "Dear Dr. Winkelman, thank you for coming and helping us with our problem that we have. We are so pleased, and the students are so happy to be able to graduate." And then he went on and on and on and on. And he says, "All of our teachers that went to your seminar are all excited about this and everything." So then it wasn't a week later, I get a nice letter from the superintendent. And it says, "Dear Dr. Winkelman, thank you so much for this wonderful exercise that you did for us and helping us and teaching us all these things." And he said, now, the next thing it says, "Under no circumstance will we ever have your program in our school again." And I was in shock. So I called him up, and we'll say his name was Bill. I said, "Bill, what in the heck is going on?" He says, "I can't hardly even talk to you. I'm so embarrassed." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, after the seminar and the week after we talked on the phone, every single special ed teacher in the whole Evergreen district left their classes unattended, came and walked into his office and surrounded him in his desk and told him, 'If you ever have that man's program in the district again, we will shut down the Evergreen School District so it can never open again.'" And I was in shock. I said, didn't they listen when I did the seminar? I told them, "Look at you guys. I brought this program in that I developed. I'm only one guy. I can't come in here and teach 25 or 30 or 50 students. I'm planning to teach you, the special ed teachers, so that you have a technique that works and you're in control of it." And so anyway, he went with the special ed teachers.
Yeah.
And David Douglas district in Portland did the same thing. I mean, almost word for word. Can you imagine how my heart breaks for those kids?
Oh my goodness. So, do you work mostly with children or do you work with adults too?
Well, I started out teaching parents learning how to learn for your kids. And so I will not work with a student, even if they're 18 years old, unless someone else is there, like a parent. And the parents, we as parents learned just by guessing, by gosh, didn't we? Our parents were never trained to teach us how to think. Now, if you've been out on a ranch or something, you got some really good thinking training. But the most of us I grew up in Klamath Falls, and we had wonderful parents and they cared, but they were taught teachers do teaching, plumbers do plumbing, and electricians do that, and school teachers teach. Parents, you stay out of it. You see? And are they really throwing that in the face of people today? You go in to a meeting with the superintendents, and if you go after them, they're going to have the FBI down on your butt now. Did you know that? That's been happening.
I've heard
anyway,
of those happening.
So us as parents, can't we benefit being able to do things more efficiently, with less stress, with less anxiety, without feeling dumb and stupid when we're really brilliant?
I'd like to feel less dumb and stupid.
Yeah. Well, if we don't do things exactly correct, we keep getting it in the nose, we're not doing it right and this and that.
Hey, so you had a couple really neat stories, and I just wanted you to share maybe one or two more stories about students and people you've worked with that were really remarkable, the turnaround.
Well, I'd love to. They call me Gabby Hayes. You know that, don't you? I watched too many John Wayne movies. Anyway, well, just 4 years ago, right here in LeGrand, I had a lady that works for the government, and she had heard about my training, and she came to my office. I was in the chiropractor's office, just 4th Street up here, and 4th and 12th. And so she comes in the afternoon. She says, "Doctor, I heard about your work." And I said, "Well, that's wonderful. I hope it was all good." She says, "It was." And by the way, we have a 97% success rate over a 50-year period. I hired a friend of mine who does that for his living. It took 2 weeks to go through everything. Then he came up with the things. Well, anyway, back to this story. So she said, it says on a Friday afternoon, she said, "Doctor, I was up at the school. They asked me to come up for my son, who's a senior, and they said there's no way he can graduate, period. And don't even try to get him the stuff he needs done to graduate." And she said, "Do you think you can help him?" I said, "Well, I developed an evaluation that will possibly help us figure out what's causing his problem." And so I said, "Please come in." Now, I will not, by the way, work with a child, I even get adult kids with their mothers in there. Anyway, and so I tested him in front of her, told her what I thought was wrong, and she decided to go ahead and put him into training. Now, this is in, it was like in December of the year, just before Christmas time. That's why I'm remembering it as. Anyway, so I started him, and she was there for each of the meetings. The very first meeting, he accomplished more in one meeting than my average students for the last 50 years take 6 weeks to do.
Wow.
Now, I didn't give him an IQ test, but I'm pretty good on that, and I estimated his IQ around 160.
Whoa.
Well, most people, it's around normal is around 90s. See?
Whoa.
So guess what the little rascal did? He had a form of dyslexia. And I was able, because I've studied it and know about it, I was able to help him correct it almost immediately.
Whoa.
So now, within less than 2 weeks, he had accomplished every single thing. And I didn't help him, and his mother didn't help him. What I was able to do was open his mind so he knew how to use it effectively. And by the way, I never heard a word from this school. I've had schools actually call me and say, "You're making this kid too darn good. If he gets out of our special ed, we lose $15,000.
That seems a little backwards, doesn't it?
$15,000. Normal is $6,000 for average student. At least it was.
Yeah.
So my goal with people is to help them take control of their body and their brain so they can have a happy, successful life.
Sure. Seems like the kid improving to the point where he could be not in special ed would be worth losing the money in the school district over.
You want to hear another story?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay.
Oh, hey, wait, tell me first, doctor, what did you ever get that kid's IQ tested?
Did I ever what?
Get the kid's IQ tested that you thought was 160?
Oh, I don't normally have my IQ tested, because if they don't know how to process well, they'll not do good on the IQ test.
Mm-hmm.
But if they can process, they get to the real thing.
Yeah.
It's
Okay,
like
tell me the
I
next
had
story.
an IQ test once, and it was my roommate in college. He gave me an IQ test. Well, he gave it to me backwards. I'm doing the other end backwards to the front, and it was fun. I came out really good, by the way.
I'm sure you did. Okay, tell me, I want to hear this other story.
Okay, Down syndrome. Theoretically, you can't hardly do anything with a Down syndrome person. They do vary quite a bit, by the way. So my attorney had a Down syndrome daughter, and they loved that little girl and did everything they could to help her. And so I started them into training, and all of a sudden, I taught them how to teach her and how to help her process and how to learn. That darn kid was on the honor roll.
Oh my goodness.
Now that's impossible. How can you get a Down syndrome kid on the honor roll?
Wow.
But she was able to do it with the help of her parents, and it was successful.
I love it.
I live more for that and their success than anything else.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, doctor, I want to just touch on the services you offer. You know, if people are having trouble with completing tasks, correct me if any of these are wrong. If they're suffering from distraction, reading comprehension, spelling, writing, math, organization, motivation, rebellious attitude, following directions, school, ADD, ADHD, shutting down under pressure. I could use some help on that one. Communication, dyslexia, Asperger's, and autism. You work with folks with all of those issues or problems or challenges?
Okay. When I had that guy do the test for the 97% success rate, I found out that the 3% all had exactly the same problem. And it just shocked me. And you would never guess what the problem was. There are certain people who use other people's problems to get attention for themselves. So you've heard about it where the woman takes a baby and it's not breathing in the hospital. That's that same type of problem. So I realized finally that I had to keep my eyes really open, even though we're getting 97%, I'd like to get all 100%, and make sure that the parents did. And I caught 2 or 3 more of the women like that. One of them was the wife of an engineer. And she was one of the nicest, loveliest people I've ever met in my life. And she dearly loved her daughter. So we started into training. Now, as the girl is getting better and better and better, the mother was getting worse and worse and worse. So they put her in the hospital for 10 days, spent $10,000 or $15,000 trying to figure out what was wrong with her. So finally, it was so funny. It wasn't funny, but it was funny. So I finally got her to where I felt that she could kind of handle it. And so she canceled out and she's happy. Oh my gosh, she was on TV with me and on radio shows and went to seminars to tell how good the program was. And so I finally thanked her for all her hard work and everything. And so she quit. Well, they still hadn't found out. They thought she was dying. She got so sick. 1 week later, after finishing the training, she came into the office dressed like a Hawaiian and she was all excited and dancing and she had a complete recovery in 1 week as soon as you got the picture.
That is so cool.
It was hilarious.
Now, Doctor, one of the last things I wanted to ask was, have you ever found nutrition to be helpful in regards to cognitive brain function?
Oh, the knowledge that has come from science related to nutrition is awesome. I'm even dealing with it. I'm 83 years old, and I do things that people at 50 can't even do anymore. And it's so exciting. And not that I'm all 100% well, but I'm maintaining thinking and all of that stuff. It's really, really, really good. Now, we've got to remember our body runs on chemistry, okay? And so we got to study and figure out what the child needs to help their brain to develop. Right. And you can actually shut things down by not eating properly. Right. Now, how many people are way overweight in our society? That can be taken care of. I was 230 pounds and I figured, oh my gosh, at 6'2", I'm getting too heavy. So I started taking things from your store, the green tea that comes from Japan. And I figured it all out. One of my clients, by the way, is the woman that owns that. Yes. That whole business. And they told me how good it was.
Sammy T. Sammy T. She lives in Enterprise.
Yes, I know. I've been there. And anyway, I had a nice relationship with them. They weren't my students per se, but we had a nice, wonderful relationship. So I made my own diet. I have 1 teaspoon of that green tea, 3 tablespoons or teaspoons of honey, right? And then a big gob of peanut butter. And I lost 35 pounds in a month. And I had more energy. And I ate 1 meal a day. And I slept good. It was wonderful. So chemistry is important. And you can go on YouTube and places like that and learn a whole much about stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, the other side is,
and keeping the wrong things out, the wrong things and chemicals can really affect the brain poorly as well.
Well, absolutely. Sugar, we shouldn't be eating sugar, even though it's so good, right? And there's one other thing I'd like to share with people. When I grew up, I would go to a phone booth and put in a dime and call somebody. And nowadays, our technology is so incredible that I can go down any street in America, and if there are four kids walking together, they're all got their phone right in their face. And if you talk to them, they can't remember even what they were seeing in their phone. So if we were going to do something, instead of putting masks on, I think we should turn the phones off.
Yeah.
That's an old 83-year-old codger that said that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's so important. I think it really inhibits our brain's ability to thrive, to function, to remember things, to be creative. I've heard it really stunts creativity. As soon as we start watching something in entertainment, our creative part of our brain just turn off.
Yes, you're right.
So
I want people to know that are watching this.
Yes.
This gentleman here, Blake, is one of the kindest, nicest people I've met in years. And they're raising their child wonderfully. The children, excuse me.
Well, that means a lot. Thank you so much, Dr. Winkelman. And you've really been a pleasure to get to talk to and get to know more recently. And I really appreciate your inspiration, and what you teach is just so cool. It's intriguing. It's inspirational. And I'm looking forward to working with you more in some of these things. And I just wanted to touch on in closing, because we talked about nutrition, getting away from processed foods, processed sugars, processed flours, getting to where you're getting real food, real fruits, real vegetables, real animal products that aren't processed, that aren't the way God made them, not the way man made them. If it grows on a plant, good. If it's made in a plant, bad. And you got it. And the dyes, the preservatives, the pesticides, the chemicals, those are really affecting our children and their ability to be healthy, and their ability to thrive and think and learn and be successful. And so, we got to be thinking about that for our own children and in our community as well.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, please do.
Any of you people that live within 300 miles of La Grande, come over to Nature's Pantry. That's what I've been coming to for the last 20 years. And I'll tell you what, they go out of their way to help you get what you need.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And I want to also say, if anybody's needing to have some cognitive brain training, please reach out to Dr. Winkelman. He is still doing this. He is still thriving. He came over and worked with my son the other day. He's going to work with me. I'm going to have him come into the store and do some of this with our team, so we can learn about each other and how we process, what our preferences for processing information are, so we can work together better. And it's Winkelman Educational Solutions, and it's just a phone number. You can just call him. It's 541-910-7195. 541-910-7195. And I was just thinking of that, what you told me, to remember your number. I'll never forget it, because it's the price of a woman's dress, $71.95. And you're right, I didn't forget it. So you can contact him and make an appointment. He'd love to work with your children. He's really amazing with the kids, and my son was really nervous about it, and he is having some anxiety about it, and once he got out there, he just thrived, and Dr. Winkelman did really great with him. And so appreciate that, and thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Winkelman. It's been a pleasure to have you, and an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you all so much for joining us at the Vibrant You Health Show. Remember that small habits lead to big change, and health is the greatest wealth. So invest in your health, because you are worth it. Bye now. God bless. We'll see you next time.